The late evening light cascaded through the floor to ceiling windows of the metropolitan Manhattan's crown jewel of fine dining, casting long shadows across the white tablecloths. Michael Grant sat alone at his regular corner table, a position that allowed him to observe the entire restaurant while maintaining the privacy he valued. At 56, Grant cut an imposing figure even seated. His 6'2" frame carried with military precision salt and pepper hair, trimmed short in a style unchanged since his Navy days 3 decades earlier. His attention was fixed on the phone conversation that had just ended, the news unsettling enough to cause the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth, the only outward sign of his displeasure that anyone who didn't know him well would notice. The Okinawa deal was falling apart. After 6 months of careful negotiation, the Japanese investors were backing out, citing concerns that had never been mentioned in previous discussions. Grant slipped his phone into the inner pocket of his Tom Ford suit jacket, a ritual gesture that helped him compartmentalize. The phone disappeared, and with it temporarily the problem. Years of command had taught him that panic solved nothing. Solutions emerged from clarity, not chaos. "Would you like to order now, sir?" The waitress appeared at his table, her professional demeanor perfectly calibrated for the establishment. Grant glanced up, taking in the young woman for the first time. Early 30s, he guessed. Blonde hair pulled back in a practical style. Blue eyes that held something more than the practiced hospitality of service staff. Intelligence, perhaps. Certainly dignity. Her name tag read Sarah. "I'll have the usual," he replied, then noticed she wasn't marrying his regular server. "You're new." "First week, sir, and I'm not familiar with your usual yet." Grant studied her for a moment longer than necessary. The uncomfortable news from Okinawa still simmered beneath his composed exterior, creating an unusual impulse. A test, perhaps, or merely a distraction. "In that case, I'll have your financial advice with a side of sparkling water." Sarah Jenkins paused, pen hovering above her notepad. She'd been warned about the high-profile clientele at the metropolitan titans of industry, who treated staff as furniture, at best emotional punching bags at worst. 8 hours into a double shift, her feet aching in the regulation heels. This was precisely the kind of interaction she didn't need. "I'm sorry, sir." Her voice remained professionally pleasant, though her blue eyes narrowed slightly. "I don't believe that's on our menu." Grant looked up fully now, momentarily caught off guard. He'd expected embarrassment, confusion, perhaps even flustered deference. Instead, this waitress regarded him with composure and the faintest hint of what might be disapproval. "It was a joke," he said, tapping his platinum card against the table. "But since you mentioned it, where would you invest $1 million in today's market?" The question hung in the air between them. Sarah recognized him now. Michael Grant, founder and CEO of Halcyon Capital. Former Navy SEAL turned investment prodigy. Widowed a decade ago, estimated worth $11 billion. Known for being brilliant, ruthless, and utterly meticulous. Honestly, she met his gaze directly. "I would diversify 40% into emerging market ETFs focusing on sustainable energy infrastructure, particularly in Southeast Asia and parts of Africa. 30% in undervalued mid-cap companies with strong fundamentals, but depressed prices due to recent market overcorrections. 20% in municipal bonds for the tax advantages. And keep 10% liquid for opportunistic acquisitions when the Fed announces its next move." The half-smile froze on Grant's face. He set down his phone, his full attention now on the woman before him. "That's surprisingly specific." His eyes narrowed. "Did you memorize that from somewhere?" "No, sir, just an opinion." Her expression remained neutral, the professional mask firmly in place. "Now, about your actual order." "Wait." Grant leaned forward, suddenly intrigued. "Explain the emerging market rationale." Sarah glanced around at her other tables, then back at Grant. "I have customers waiting." "They can wait." He gestured to the empty chair opposite him. "Sit, 5 minutes. I'll make it worth your while." "I could lose my job." Grant looked around, then waved over the maitre d'. "Edward, I'm borrowing your waitress for a business discussion. Any issues?" Edward's eyes widened. "Of course not, Mr. Grant. Take all the time you need." Sarah reluctantly sat down, setting her order pad aside. "This is inappropriate." "So was your surprisingly sophisticated investment advice." Grant studied her face carefully. "Where did that come from, finance major?" "Something like that." She straightened the silverware in front of her, avoiding his gaze. Columbia MBA program, part-time. Does it matter you asked a question as a joke? She looked up, though clearly you didn't expect a waitress to have a brain. Instead of being offended, Grant laughed. Fair enough. You caught me being an ass. He tilted his head. The sustainable energy angle is interesting, but why emerging markets specifically? Sarah hesitated only briefly before responding. Western markets are oversaturated with the green investments, chasing limited opportunities, creating a bubble effect. Meanwhile, developing nations offer significantly greater growth potential with their expanding energy needs and fewer regulatory hurdles. Their governments are desperate for infrastructure investment, providing tax incentives that boost ROI by at least 4% annually. Grant's eyes widened slightly. That wasn't just informed, it was sophisticated analysis. Who are you? He asked, genuinely perplexed. Just a waitress with an interest in finance, she replied with a small, enigmatic smile. Now, can I take your actual order? Or would you prefer to continue interrogating me about my hobbies? Grant studied her for a long moment. There was more to this story, much more. But he recognized a wall when he saw one. Ribeye rare, truffle mac on the side. He paused. And your name? I'd like your actual name. Sarah Jenkins, and I'll put that order in right away, Mr. Grant. As she walked away, Grant found himself watching her with newfound interest. The graceful efficiency of her movements, the quiet dignity in her posture despite the serving uniform. Most of the women in his orbit demanded attention. This woman seemed determined to avoid it. Grant pulled out his phone and opened a secure messaging app. Need background check. Sarah Jenkins works at the Metropolitan. Priority. The response came quickly. On it, preliminary by morning. Grant put his phone away just as Sarah returned with his sparkling water. Your food will be out shortly, Mr. Grant. Michael, he corrected. And thank you, Sarah. Something flashed in her eyes, surprise at the courtesy perhaps, before she nodded and moved on to her next table. Throughout his meal, Grant found his attention repeatedly drawn to her. She moved with practiced ease through the restaurant, efficiently managing her section while deflecting the occasional inappropriate comment from a drunken finance bro with subtle grace. When she brought his check, Grant added a $5,000 tip to his $300 meal. Sarah's eyes widened when she saw it. This is excessive. Consider it a consulting fee for the financial advice. He stood buttoning his suit jacket, which, by the way, was better than what I get from half my team at Halcyon. I can't accept this. You can and you will. His tone was firm, but not unkind. And I'd like to continue our conversations sometime, professionally. Sarah hesitated, then slid the leather folio with his card and receipt back across the table. I don't think that would be appropriate. Grant raised an eyebrow. Scared, her chin lifted slightly. Cautious. There's a difference. Fair enough. He pulled out a business card and wrote his private number on the back. When you change your mind, call me. I have a proposition that might interest someone with your unexpected talents. If, she corrected, taking the card reluctantly. If I change my mind. Grant smiled. Trust me, it's when. As he walked out of the restaurant into the cool Manhattan evening, his phone buzzed with a preliminary report. Sarah Jenkins, 32. Employment history checks out. Started at the Metropolitan 3 weeks ago. Part-time MBA student at NYU. Community college undergrad. Nothing unusual. Full report tomorrow. Grant frowned, sliding into the back of his waiting Maybach. That couldn't be right. No one acquired that level of financial acumen from a community college finance class. Home, sir? His driver asked. No, Grant replied, his mind still on the waitress with the financial wizard's brain. Office, I need to look into something. The crisp autumn air bit at Sarah's cheeks as she walked the 5 blocks to the subway station. Her apartment in Brooklyn was a 45-minute commute, on a good day longer at this hour. She clutched her coat tighter around her body, Michael Grant's business card burning a hole in her pocket. $5,000, the exact amount she needed for this semester's tuition payment due in 3 days. Coincidence, or had he somehow known? Her phone buzzed with an email notification that made her blood freeze. Regarding your application for financial assistance, she opened it with trembling fingers. Dear Mrs. Jenkins, we regret to inform you that your request for additional financial aid has been denied due to limited funding availability. Sarah leaned against a building, suddenly lightheaded. Without that aid, even with the $5,000 tip, she wouldn't make it through the semester. Everything she'd worked for, the careful plan to rebuild her life. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a text from her roommate. "Rent due tomorrow. You have your half." Sarah closed her eyes briefly. The $5,000 would cover tuition and rent, with enough left over for groceries for a month, but taking it felt dangerously close to establishing a connection she couldn't afford. She looked at the business card in her hand, Michael Grant, the man whose company managed over $30 billion in assets. A man who could crush her rebuilt identity with one phone call if he discovered who she really was. Before she could reconsider, she dialed his private number. He answered on the second ring. That was faster than I expected. His voice carried a note of satisfaction. Sarah swallowed her pride. "I'd like to hear about that proposition." "Excellent. Are you free tomorrow, say noon?" "I have class until 2, then work at 5. "Class." His tone sharpened with interest. "Where?" Sarah hesitated. "NYU, part-time MBA program." "Interesting. My office at 3 then. I'll text you the address." "Mr. Grant." "Michael." "Michael," she corrected herself. "What exactly is this proposition?" There was a brief pause. "Let's just say I could use someone with your financial instincts. My usual consultants are too embedded in conventional wisdom. You clearly think differently." Sarah closed her eyes. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "I'll be there at 3, but I should warn you if this is anything inappropriate." "It's business." He cut her off, his tone suddenly cool. "Whatever else you may have heard about me, I don't mix business with pleasure." The call ended, leaving Sarah with a nagging feeling that she just made either the best decision of her life or the worst. Later that night in her small Brooklyn apartment, Sarah Jenkins became Rebecca Harris again, if only for a few hours. The studio apartment was sparse but meticulously organized. A single bed, a desk with a laptop, and a bookshelf filled with finance and economic textbooks. No photographs, no mementos, nothing that connected her to the life she'd left behind 3 years ago. She pulled out a locked box from underneath her bed and opened it with a key she kept on a chain around her neck. Inside was a passport with her real name, Rebecca Elizabeth Harris, former senior analyst at Valence Global. Rising star in the financial world until the day she discovered irregularities in several offshore accounts. Beside the passport lay a thumb drive containing the only evidence she'd managed to save before fleeing, not enough to prove her innocence, but enough to remind her that she wasn't crazy, that she had seen what she had seen. Rebecca opened her laptop and began researching Michael Grant and Halcyon Capital more thoroughly than she had allowed herself to do before. The company had a reputation for aggressive but legal investment strategies focusing on technology, renewable energy, and infrastructure. Grant himself was known for his strategic brilliance and demanding leadership style, but there were no whispers of the kind of fraud she had uncovered at Valence. Still, she had trusted once before and lost everything. She couldn't afford to make the same mistake twice. Rebecca carefully returned the box to its hiding place. Tomorrow she would be Sarah Jenkins again, the waitress with an unexpected talent for financial analysis. She would meet with Michael Grant, hear his proposition, and maintain the careful boundaries that had kept her safe these past 3 years. What she didn't know was that across town in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, Michael Grant was conducting his own investigation, one that would soon uncover the secret she'd been hiding. At precisely 2:59 p.m. the following day, Sarah stepped out of the elevator onto the 75th floor of the gleaming Halcyon Capital headquarters. The receptionist looked her up and down, taking in her simple black pencil skirt and white blouse, the nicest outfit she owned, but clearly not up to the standards of the women who typically visited this floor. "May I help you?" Her tone suggested Sarah had walked into the wrong building entirely. "Sarah Jenkins to see Michael Grant." The receptionist's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "Do you have an appointment?" "Yes, for 3 o'clock." She checked her computer with obvious skepticism, then looked up in surprise. "You're on his schedule. Please take a seat." Sarah sat on the edge of an uncomfortably modern chair, acutely aware that she didn't belong in this world of glass and steel and silent judgment. 3 years ago, she would have walked in with confidence, wearing designer clothes, her credentials unquestioned. Now she felt like an imposter, waiting to be exposed at any moment. Ms. Jenkins, a deep voice interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see a man in his early 60s with salt and pepper hair and a serious expression. His posture and bearing immediately suggested military background, much like Grant himself. I'm Victor Reynolds, Chief Operating Officer. Mr. Grant asked me to escort you to his office. He didn't offer to shake her hand. Sarah followed him through a maze of glass-walled offices and open workspaces where analysts hunched over multiple screens displaying financial data. No one looked up as she passed. Reynolds stopped at a large corner office with spectacular views of Central Park. Wait here. He disappeared inside. Through the glass, Sarah could see Grant seated behind a massive desk, frowning at whatever Reynolds was saying. He glanced up, caught her eye, and waved her in, dismissing Reynolds with a curt nod. Sarah, Grant stood as she entered, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. Thank you for coming. Up here in his natural habitat, Michael Grant seemed even more imposing than at the restaurant. His tailored suit probably cost more than she made in 3 months, and the casual confidence with which he commanded this space made her painfully aware of how far she'd fallen. Your chief operating officer doesn't approve of this meeting, she observed, sitting down. Grant's mouth quirked. Reynolds doesn't approve of most things. It's why I keep him around. He studied her for a moment. You look different today. I'm not wearing an apron. It's more than that. His eyes narrowed slightly. You're more guarded. Last night, when I caught you off guard, I saw something genuine. I'm always genuine, Sarah replied, just selectively expressive. That earned her a genuine laugh. Well said. He leaned back in his chair. I did some research on you last night. Sarah tensed. Did you? Nothing invasive, basic background. He tilted his head. Community college, then waitressing, now part-time at NYU's MBA program. A solid path, but it doesn't explain your level of market knowledge. I read a lot. His bluntness was startling. What you gave me yesterday wasn't book knowledge. It was the kind of insight that comes from actual market experience. His eyes fixed on hers. So who are you really, Sarah Jenkins? For a moment, she considered walking out, but the memory of that rejection email kept her seated. Does it matter you said you had a business proposition? Grant studied her for a long moment, then nodded, apparently deciding to let it go for now. I need a fresh perspective on some investment opportunities. He pressed a button on his desk, and a hidden panel in the wall slid open to reveal a large screen. Specifically these. Sarah turned to look at the display, which showed a series of prospective investments in various sectors. Her eyes widened slightly as she scanned the data. These are all pre-IPO opportunities in emerging markets. Risky, potentially very rewarding, he countered. But my team is divided. Half say invest heavily, half say avoid completely. He gestured toward the screen. What do you say? Sarah stood up and approached the display, studying the figures more closely. Something about the pattern seemed familiar. May I? She gestured to the keyboard beneath the screen. Grant nodded, watching her intently. Sarah began typing, pulling up additional data and arranging it in different configurations. As she worked, she forgot about Grant, forgot about her precarious situation, lost in the familiar flow of financial analysis. There, she said, finally stepping back. These three have solid fundamentals and management teams with proven track records. These two are overvalued based on projected market penetration. And this one, she pointed to a seemingly promising renewable energy company. This one is a sophisticated fraud. Grant's expression sharpened. Explain. The reported growth curve is too smooth. Real growth has variations, hiccups. She pulled up the relevant data. And if you cross-reference their reported manufacturing capacity with their energy consumption at these facilities, the numbers don't add up. They're reporting production levels that would require at least 40% more energy than they're actually using. Grant stood and moved beside her, studying the data with newfound intensity. His shoulder nearly touched hers as he leaned in, the faint scent of his expensive cologne registering at the edge of her awareness. How did you catch that? He asked quietly. Sarah hesitated. Pattern recognition. I've seen similar discrepancies before. Grant turned to look at her, their faces suddenly close. Where the intensity of his gaze made her take a step back. It's a common fraudulent pattern. Not common enough that my entire team of analysts missed it, Grant countered. In fact, they were recommending this as our primary investment target. He studied her face. You just saved me from a potential $100 million mistake. Sarah felt a flush of validation that she immediately tried to suppress. This wasn't her world anymore. She couldn't afford to get pulled back in. I should go. I'll be late for work. Don't go back to the restaurant, Grant said abruptly. Excuse me. I want to hire you as a consultant, exclusive contract, your own office here. Seven-figure compensation package. Sarah stared at him. You can't be serious. I'm never anything but serious about talent. Grant's expression was intense. You have something my team of Ivy League MBAs doesn't. I want it working for me, not serving overpriced steaks. The offer was like a dream, a path back to the life she'd lost, the career that had been stolen from her arm. But at what cost, and how long before he discovered the truth? I can't, she said, even as everything in her screamed to accept. Grant's expression hardened. Why not? And don't tell me you prefer waitressing. It's complicated. Uncomplicated, or at least tell me what you're afraid of. Sarah met his gaze directly. What makes you think I'm afraid? Because you're obviously overqualified for your current life, which means you're hiding, and people only hide when they're afraid. His perception was unnervingly accurate. Sarah looked away toward his spectacular view of the city that had once been her playground and had become her prison. I can't be publicly associated with the Halcyon Capital, she finally said, or any financial institution. Grant's eyes narrowed. Why not? That's personal. Not if you're going to work for me, he crossed his arms. I need to know what I'm getting into. Sarah hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. I made some enemies in the financial world, powerful ones. It's better for everyone if I stay invisible. Grant studied her for a long moment. What if I can guarantee your anonymity contract under a pseudonym, private office, no public association with the company? You would do that for someone you just met. For someone who just spotted a sophisticated fraud that my entire team missed, absolutely. He stepped closer. I didn't build this company by ignoring exceptional talent, Sarah. On the way he said her name with a mixture of curiosity and something almost like respect made her pause. The rational part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea, that she was risking everything she'd carefully rebuilt. But the part of her that had been buried for 3 years, the analyst who loved the intellectual challenge, who thrived on the complexity of markets, that part was awakening hungry. I'll need everything in writing, ironclad confidentiality agreements. And I work remotely, not from this office. Grant smiled slowly, the expression transforming his face. So that's a yes. It's a conditional maybe, Sarah corrected, pending contract review. I'll have legal draw up the paperwork tonight. He extended his hand. Welcome aboard, Ms. Jenkins. As she shook his hand, Sarah felt the strangest sensation, like she was stepping back into a world she'd been exiled from, guided by the last person she should trust. What she didn't know was that Michael Grant had already assigned a team to dig deeper into her past, and they were close to uncovering the secret she'd spent 3 years hiding. 2 weeks into her consulting arrangement with Halcyon Capital, Sarah was finally beginning to relax. The work was exhilarating, challenging in a way that waitressing could never be. Grant had kept his word about her anonymity, assigning her cases under the pseudonym SJ Consulting, and allowing her to work primarily from her apartment, coming to the office only for essential meetings. Today was one such meeting scheduled with Grant and his executive team to discuss a potential acquisition target, a financial technology startup with a promising algorithm but questionable management. Sarah arrived early, hoping to slip into the conference room unnoticed before the senior executives arrived. Her strategy failed when she found Grant already there, sleeves rolled up, studying projections on the large screen. You're early, he observed without looking up. So are you. It's my company. I'm never early, just present when needed. He finally turned to face her. You look better. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? More confident, less like you're expecting someone to throw you out. He gestured to the chair beside his at the head of the table. The work agrees with you. It was true. The past 2 weeks had been transformative. The salary Grant had offered allowed her to pay her tuition, move to a better apartment, and finally sleep without the constant anxiety of financial ruin looming over her. More than that, using her mind again, her real skills felt like reclaiming a part of herself. The work is fine, she conceded. taking a seat near the middle of the table instead of beside him. Grant noticed her choice but didn't comment. Just fine. You've identified two potential frauds and flagged concerns about a management team that we later discovered was embezzling. I'd say you're excelling. Sarah shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. It's what you hired me for. Grant studied her for a moment. You know what I can't figure out? Why someone with your talent was waiting tables in the first place. MBA or not, you clearly already know more than most of my analysts. Sarah tensed. She'd been waiting for this line of questioning. I told you, complications enemies in finance. You said. Grant leaned against the conference table. I've been in this business for over 2 decades. I know most of the major players. Who exactly are you hiding from? Before Sarah could formulate a response, the door opened and Victor Reynolds entered, followed by several executives. The COO shot Sarah a suspicious glance before addressing Grant. Everyone's here. Shall we begin? Grant's eyes lingered on Sarah for a moment longer before he nodded. Let's start. The meeting proceeded efficiently. Charts and projections flashed across the screen as various department heads presented their analyses of the acquisition target. Sarah listened carefully, making notes but not speaking. So the consensus is to proceed with the acquisition? Grant asked after the last presentation. Nods around the table. What about you, Sarah? You've been quiet. All eyes turned to her. She could feel Reynolds' particular gaze, heavy with disapproval. I have concerns, she said carefully. Of course you do, Reynolds muttered under his breath. Grant shot him a warning look. Explain. Sarah stood and approached the screen, pulling up specific data points from the due diligence report. Their algorithm isn't as proprietary as they claim. The core functionality uses open-source components with minimal customization. What they're really selling is the data set they've compiled, but even that has issues. She highlighted several discrepancies in the target company's performance metrics. These growth patterns suggest data manipulation. That's a serious accusation, said the head of legal, frowning. On what basis pagination artifacts in their user engagement data? Sarah explained. When you automatically generate reports, page breaks create subtle patterns in the data. But these reports show different patterns when comparing monthly to quarterly data, suggesting the reports weren't generated from the same source data. Grant's eyes narrowed. They're cooking the books. I believe so, yes. Reynolds shook his head. This is absurd. We've had 3 teams review their financials. They wouldn't catch this, Sarah replied calmly. It's not about the numbers themselves, but inconsistencies in how they're reported. And you just happen to know how to spot these obscure pagination artifacts. Reynolds' tone was openly skeptical. Now, who exactly vetted this consultant? The room fell uncomfortably silent. I did, Grant said flatly, and her track record over the past 2 weeks speaks for itself. With all due respect, Reynolds persisted, we know nothing about Miss Jenkins' background or qualifications. For all we know, she could be working for a competitor. Sarah felt her cheeks burning. This was exactly the kind of attention she'd been afraid of. That's enough, Victor. Grant's voice held a warning, but Reynolds wasn't backing down. No, it's not enough. You brought in this waitress. Former waitress, Grant corrected coldly. And suddenly she's overruling our entire analytics department. Something doesn't add up. Reynolds turned to Sarah. Who are you really? Sarah stood her ground. I'm exactly who Michael hired me to be. Someone who sees patterns others miss. Convenient skill, Reynolds said. Almost like you've had professional training, yet your resume shows nothing of the sort. My background isn't relevant to my ability to do this job. Actually, it's entirely relevant when you're advising on billion-dollar acquisitions. Reynolds turned to Grant. I took the liberty of running a deeper background check. Grant's expression darkened. Without my authorization, as Chief Operating Officer, protecting this company is my responsibility. Reynolds pulled out a file. Sarah Jenkins only exists as of 3 years ago. Before that, nothing. No credit history, no employment records, no social media. She appeared out of nowhere at age 29. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. You had no right. Actually, I had every right. Reynolds turned to address the room. Our mysterious consultant is either using a false identity or has gone to extraordinary lengths to erase her past. Either way, can we trust her with sensitive financial decisions? The room erupted in murmurs. Sarah looked at Grant, who was watching her with an unreadable expression. Meeting adjourned, ma'am, he said abruptly. Everyone out except you, he pointed at Sarah. And you, he pointed at Reynolds. The executives filed out, casting curious glances over their shoulders. When the door closed behind them, Grant turned to Reynolds. Never undermine me like that again. Michael, be reasonable. That wasn't a suggestion. Grant's voice was quiet but lethal. You're on thin ice, Victor. Get out. Reynolds hesitated, then gathered his papers and left, closing the door with deliberate softness that somehow seemed more threatening than a slam. Alone with Grant, Sarah felt her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. She hadn't expected the background check to go so deep. Sit down, Grant said, his tone gentler than it had been with Reynolds, but still firm. Sarah sat, her mind racing through options. Denial, partial truth, full confession. Is what he said true? Grant asked, taking the seat across from her. Did you appear out of nowhere 3 years ago? Sarah met his gaze. Yes. Grant nodded slowly. I suspected as much. The disconnect between your skills and your resume was too significant. He leaned forward. Who were you before Sarah Jenkins? I can't tell you that. Can't or won't. Both. Sarah straightened her shoulders. My past is my own, Michael. It has nothing to do with my work for you. It does if it puts my company at risk. His expression was serious. Are you running from something illegal? No. That much was true, at least. I never broke any laws. Are you in danger? The question caught her off guard. What? Is someone trying to harm you? Is that why you changed your identity? There was genuine concern in his voice, which confused her even more than the question itself. No, it's not like that. Grant studied her face. Then what is it like, Sarah? Because right now I've got a chief operating officer who thinks you're a corporate spy executive, questioning your credibility and mounting evidence that you're hiding something significant. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. Everything she'd worked to rebuild was slipping away again. I should go. She stood. This was a mistake. Grant remained seated. Running again, is that your solution to everything? The comment stung mainly because it contained a kernel of truth. I'm not running, I'm protecting myself. From what? Grant stood now, frustration evident in his voice. I've given you everything you asked for. Anonymity, remote work, exceptional compensation. I've defended you against my own staff. What more do you need from me to trust me with the truth? It's not about trust, Michael. The hell it isn't. He moved closer. You've spent 3 years hiding. At some point, you need to decide if you're going to live your life looking over your shoulder or face whatever you're running from. His words hit uncomfortably close to home, sparking a flash of anger. That's easy for you to say, she shot back. You've never lost everything in a single day. Never had your life stolen from you. Never been betrayed by... She stopped herself, already saying too much. Grant's eyes narrowed. Betrayed by whom? Sarah grabbed her bag. I'm leaving. Sarah, my consulting agreement has a termination clause. Consider this my notice. She headed for the door, heart pounding. I know who you are, Grant said quietly. Sarah froze her hand on the doorknob. Rebecca Elizabeth Harris, he continued. Former senior analyst at Valence Global. Specialized in emerging markets, considered a rising star until 3 years ago when you were implicated in an insider trading scheme that cost investors millions. You disappeared right before the SEC investigation concluded. Slowly, Sarah turned to face him, her worst fears confirmed. How long have you known? I suspected something from our first conversation at the restaurant. Grant's expression was unreadable. The background check confirmed my suspicions last week. Last week, she stared at him. You have known for a week and didn't say anything. I was waiting for you to trust me enough to tell me yourself. So this was all a trap. Hire me, wait for me to incriminate myself, and then what? Turn me into the SEC. Grant's expression hardened. If that was my plan, I could have done it already. Then what do you want from me? Sarah demanded. The truth. He stepped closer. The real story, not the official version that drove you into hiding. Sarah felt cornered, exposed. The very thing she'd feared from the beginning had happened. Why would you believe anything other than the official story? Because I've watched you work for 2 weeks, Grant replied. You have an ethical compass that doesn't align with someone who would commit fraud. And because the Rebecca Harris case never sat right with me even back then, Sarah felt a surge of something unexpected hope, dangerous and fragile. It doesn't matter now, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. The damage is done. My reputation is destroyed, my career over. Unless the truth comes out. Grant held her gaze. Tell me what really happened, Rebecca. The sound of her real name unspoken for 3 years broke something inside her. I was set up, she said, the words rushing out after years of silence, by my fiancé, Alexander Valence. Valence as in Charles Valence's son. Yes, the golden boy of Valence Global, destined to take over the company. Rebecca's bitter laugh held no humor. We were engaged. I thought I knew him. What happened? Rebecca moved away from the door, the weight of silence finally lifting. I discovered irregularities in some of our Middle Eastern market accounts, significant discrepancies that suggested insider trading. When I investigated, the trail led back to Alexander and his father. They were using advanced knowledge of the firm's trading positions to make personal investments through shell companies. Grant nodded. And you confronted them. Stupidly, yes. I thought Alexander would do the right thing. She shook her head at her own naivety. Instead, he apologized, promised to fix it, asked me to keep quiet for just a few days. I believed him. The next morning, the SEC raided our offices. Somehow, all the evidence pointed to me. My signature on documents I'd never seen, transactions authorized through my credentials, offshore accounts in my name. A perfect frame, Grant murmured. Alexander appeared devastated by my betrayal. His father publicly vowed that no one, not even his future daughter-in-law, was above the law. Rebecca's voice hardened. Meanwhile, they froze my accounts, seized my assets for investigation, and spread rumors that destroyed my professional reputation. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. So you ran. I disappeared, changed my name, started over with nothing. She met his gaze defiantly. I wasn't guilty, but I couldn't prove it, and I refused to go to prison for their crimes. Grant was quiet for a moment, processing. Why didn't you fight back? Go to the media. With what evidence? They erased anything that implicated them and fabricated evidence against me. It was my word against the Valence empire. She shook her head. Even my own parents doubted me. Understanding dawned in Grant's eyes. That's why my investment portfolio looked familiar to you. You recognize the fraud pattern because it's similar to what the Valences did. Rebecca nodded. Exactly. Grant moved to the window, looking out at the city as he considered her story. The Valences have a reputation for ruthlessness, but this goes beyond that into criminal territory. Now you understand why I can't be publicly associated with any financial institution. If they discover I'm working in finance again, using my expertise, they might worry you're gathering evidence against them, Grant finished, or simply want to ensure you stay discredited. Precisely. Grant turned back to face her, his expression determined. What if we could prove your innocence? Rebecca laughed bitterly. After 3 years, impossible. Any evidence is long gone. Maybe not. Grant's eyes had that focused intensity she'd come to recognize when he was formulating a strategy. Financial criminals are creatures of habit. If they framed you, they've likely used similar tactics against others. What are you suggesting? That we investigate, quietly, find their pattern, build a case. Rebecca stared at him. Why would you do that? Why risk your company, your reputation for someone you barely know? Grant was silent for a moment, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. Because I've spent my career watching people like the Valence abuse their power, while talented people like you pay the price. He moved closer. And because in the 2 weeks you've worked here, you've shown more integrity and brilliance than most people I've known for years. The sincerity in his voice was unexpected, disarming. Rebecca had spent 3 years trusting no one, suspecting everyone. The idea of having an ally, especially one as powerful as Michael Grant, was both terrifying and exhilarating. There's something else you should know, Grant said, his voice taking on a personal tone she hadn't heard before. Charles Valence and I have history. 5 years ago, my closest friend from the Navy, James Sullivan, was working for Valence Global. He discovered some irregularities similar to what you found. 2 weeks later, he was found dead in his apartment. Suicide officially. Rebecca's eyes widened. You think they framed him too? I know they did. James would never take his own life. He left behind a wife and two children he adored. Grant's jaw tightened. I've been looking for a way to take down Charles Valence ever since, but I never had enough to go on. Until now, Rebecca said, understanding dawning. Until you walked into my restaurant, Grant confirmed. This isn't just about clearing your name, Rebecca. It's about justice for James, too. In that moment, Rebecca saw Michael Grant clearly for the first time, not just the billionaire CEO, but the loyal friend still grieving, still seeking justice. Her instincts told her to trust him, despite everything experience had taught her about trust. It's too dangerous, she said, but with less conviction. For whom you're already in hiding. I've made my career by taking calculated risks. Grant's expression turned grim. Besides, Valence Global is a competitor that uses unethical tactics. Taking them down serves justice in business. You make it sound simple. It won't be. But between your insider knowledge and my resources, he let the implication hang. Rebecca felt something she hadn't experienced in years: possibility. The chance, however slim, of reclaiming her name, her life. If we do this, she said carefully, it has to be airtight. No loose ends, no assumptions, and no one can know. Not Reynolds, not your executive team, no one. Grant nodded. Agreed. And if it becomes too dangerous, if there's any sign they suspect what we're doing, we stop immediately. I'll defer to your judgment on that. He extended his hand. Partners. Rebecca hesitated only briefly before taking his hand. Partners. As their hands met, she felt a strange sense of connection, like two people joining forces against a common enemy. Yes, but something more. An unexpected trust forming between two individuals accustomed to trusting no one. What neither of them knew was that across town in the luxurious offices of Valence Global, Alexander Valence was reviewing a security report that had flagged an unusual pattern of searches in their database. Searches focused on transactions from 3 years ago, the very transactions that had been used to frame Rebecca Harris. The hunt had already begun. For the next 2 weeks, Rebecca and Michael worked in secret building their case against Valence Global. By day, she continued her consulting work under her Sarah Jenkins identity. By night, they combed through financial records, searching for patterns that would expose Charles and Alexander Valence's crimes. They converted the guest suite in Michael's penthouse into their investigation headquarters. The walls became covered with timelines, transaction records, and photographs of key players. The space became their sanctuary, the only place where Rebecca could fully be herself. Found something, Michael announced one evening as Rebecca reviewed Valence's Middle Eastern market trades. She looked up to find him holding a stack of printouts, excitement evident in his expression. After countless hours working together in this intimate space, she'd learned to read his subtle mood shifts, the slight crease between his eyebrows, when concentrating, the almost imperceptible smile when he discovered something significant. What is it? She joined him at the central table, acutely aware of his proximity as he spread the documents before her. 3 more cases with similar patterns to yours. All talented analysts who uncovered irregularities, suddenly implicated in fraud, all professionally destroyed. His voice held controlled anger. The Valences have been systematically eliminating threats from within. Rebecca studied the case's recognition dawning. I knew 2 of these people, brilliant analysts. I never believed they were guilty. They weren't. Michael pointed to transaction records. Same signature methods used in your case. Falsified authorizations, manufactured evidence, consistent timing between discovery and takedown. Rebecca felt a surge of vindication mixed with sadness for her former colleagues. This proves it's a pattern, but not that the Valences are responsible. No, but this might. Michael pulled up an email on his secure laptop. My team intercepted communications between Alexander Valence and their compliance officer discussing containment procedures for internal threats. That's still circumstantial. We need concrete evidence linking them directly to the fraudulent transactions. Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that had become familiar during their late-night sessions. You're right. We need an insider. Rebecca tensed. That's too risky. Anyone close enough to have that information is either complicit or under their control. Not necessarily. Michael hesitated. What about your former assistant at Valence, Linda Chen? Rebecca stared at him. How do you know about Linda? Background research. At her expression, Michael had the grace to look somewhat apologetic. I needed to understand all the players. Linda was reassigned after I left. I have no idea where she is now. Chicago office, still with Valance, but isolated, effectively demoted. Michael pulled up Chen's current profile. She's been passed over for promotion 3 times despite excellent performance reviews. Rebecca studied the information memories of her earnest young assistant flooding back. Linda was loyal to me. She never believed the accusations, which is probably why they sidelined her. Michael met her eyes. She might help us. Or she might report back to Alexander immediately. Rebecca shook her head. It's too dangerous. More dangerous than living in hiding for the rest of your life, Michael challenged. At some point, we have to take calculated risks. Before Rebecca could respond, Michael's private phone rang. He checked the caller ID and frowned. It's Reynolds, at this hour. He put the call on speaker. This better be important, Victor. It is. Reynolds' voice sounded tense. Alexander Valance just called. He wants to meet with you tomorrow. Says he has a mutually beneficial proposition. Rebecca froze, blood draining from her face. Did he say what kind of proposition? Michael asked, voice carefully neutral. A potential partnership on Middle Eastern market expansion. He specifically mentioned your recent interest in those markets. The same markets Rebecca had been researching. It couldn't be coincidence. Schedule it, Michael said after a brief pause. My office, 2 p.m. Will do. Reynolds hesitated. Michael, I should mention he asked if you are still working with the consultant with the remarkable insights. His words. Rebecca felt her heart stop. Did he mention anyone by name? No, just that description. Tell him my consulting arrangements are confidential. Anything else? That's all. Should I be concerned? No. Michael's tone was dismissive. Just the usual corporate fishing. Good night, Victor. He ended the call and the room fell into heavy silence. They know, Rebecca whispered. Somehow they know I'm working with you. Michael shook his head. They suspect, but they don't know. If they had proof, Alexander wouldn't be making social calls. He'd be threatening legal action. This is exactly what I feared. Rebecca began pacing, panic rising. I need to disappear. Change identities again. Move cities. Stop. Michael stepped into her path, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders. Running is exactly what they want. It reinforces the narrative that you're guilty. What choice do I have? Her voice cracked with frustration. They destroyed my life once. They'll do it again. And this time, they'll destroy you too. Let them try. The quiet confidence in his voice made her pause. I'm not some junior analyst they can intimidate. I'm Michael Grant. My company's worth more than theirs. My political connections run deeper, and unlike them, I don't have a history of suspicious analyst departures. Rebecca looked up at him, realizing how close they were standing. In the weeks they had worked together, something had shifted between them. A growing trust, yes, but something more. Something that made her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with fear. You don't understand what they're capable of, she said quietly. I understand exactly what they're capable of. His hands tightened slightly on her shoulders. What you don't understand is what I'm capable of when someone threatens people I care about. The simple declaration stunned her. 3 years of isolation had made her forget what it felt like to have someone in her corner, someone willing to fight for her. Why are you doing this, Michael, really? The question had been building for weeks. You've built your reputation as a ruthless businessman. Why risk everything for me? Michael was silent for a moment, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. Because when you walked into my life, you were the first real thing I'd encountered in years. His voice was low, honest, in a way she'd never heard before. Everyone in my world wants something from me. Money, connection, status. You challenged me, saw through me, called me on my bullshit. And despite everything you've been through, you still have more integrity than anyone I know. The raw sincerity in his voice rendered her speechless. Also, he added a hint of his usual confidence, returning, I really hate losing and I'm not about to let the Valances win. Despite everything, Rebecca laughed, a genuine sound that surprised them both. So what's your plan? Walk into a meeting with Alexander Valance and accuse him of framing me? No. Michael's eyes gleamed with strategic calculation. I'm going to make him think I'm interested in his proposition while using the meeting to gather intelligence. He'll be suspicious, of course, but his ego won't let him pass up the opportunity to assess whether I know about you. Michael released her shoulders, stepping back to give her space. Meanwhile, you'll be monitoring the meeting remotely. What? No, that's too risky. It's controlled risk. You know Alexander better than anyone. You'll recognize his tells the hidden meanings in his statements. Rebecca considered the strategy. It was dangerous. But Michael was right. This might be their best opportunity to gather information. If he discovers I'm involved, he won't. Michael's confidence was unwavering. Trust me, Rebecca. Those two words, trust me, had been the downfall of many. Yet looking at Michael now, she realized she did trust him perhaps more than she'd trusted anyone since her world collapsed. All right, she conceded. But we do this my way, no unnecessary risks. Agreed, Michael checked his watch. It's late. You should get some rest before tomorrow. Rebecca nodded, gathering her notes. As she packed up, a realization struck her. I can't go back to my apartment. If they're watching you, they might be watching me too. Michael didn't hesitate. Stay here. The guest suite is ready. Michael, it's secure private and he has a separate entrance. No one will know you're here. His tone was practical, but his eyes held something more complex. The thought of staying in Michael's penthouse, being that close to him, sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. Just for tonight, she agreed finally. As Michael showed her to the guest suite, luxurious yet understated, Rebecca felt oddly at home despite the unfamiliar surroundings. For 3 years, she'd been running, hiding, looking over her shoulder. Tonight, for the first time since her world collapsed, she felt protected. Thank you, she said simply as Michael prepared to leave her at the door. He paused, studying her face with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. For a moment, she thought he might say something or perhaps do something that would cross the careful boundary they'd maintained. Instead, he simply nodded. Sleep well, Rebecca. As the door closed behind him, Rebecca released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Tomorrow would bring a confrontation with the man who had helped destroy her life. Tonight, she was under the protection of the man who might help her reclaim it. The realization that she wanted more than just Michael's protection was a complication she wasn't prepared to address, not with everything else at stake. Alexander Valance arrived at Halcyon Capital precisely at 2 p.m., a study in calculated charm. Tall and classically handsome with the easy confidence of old money, he greeted Michael with the warmth of a longtime colleague rather than a competitor. Michael, appreciate you making time. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced. Impressive operation you've built here. From the secure monitoring room adjacent to Michael's office, Rebecca watched through the one-way glass, a headset allowing her to hear every word. Seeing Alexander again, his familiar gestures, the way he casually adjusted his Patek Philippe watch, brought a flood of painful memories. This is a mistake, she whispered into the microphone connected to the nearly invisible earpiece Michael wore. He's too good at this game. Michael gave no indication he had heard her smoothly directing Alexander to the sitting area of his office, rather than the more formal conference table. What brings Valance Global to my door? Michael asked, his tone casually curious as they settled into the leather chairs. We don't typically move in the same circles. Alexander laughed easily. That's precisely why I'm here. Our firms have complementary strengths. Your tech innovations, our established Middle Eastern market presence, seems like a natural fit for collaboration. Interesting timing, Michael observed. We've only recently begun exploring those markets. Alexander's smile didn't waver. News travels fast in our world. Word is you've been making remarkably astute moves in territories typically challenging for newcomers. Rebecca tensed. The reference was too specific to be coincidental. I have good people, Michael replied noncommittally. Indeed. Alexander leaned forward slightly. In fact, I've heard you recently acquired quite the analyst, someone with unusual insight into market patterns. Rebecca's heart pounded. He's fishing, she whispered to Michael. He suspects, but doesn't know for certain. We're always recruiting talent. Michael said, his expression revealing nothing. Of course. Alexander sat back, seemingly relaxed. Speaking of talent, do you remember that unfortunate business with Rebecca Harris a few years back? The direct mention of her name sent a shock through Rebecca's system. She gripped the edge of the console, knuckles white. Michael raised an eyebrow, the picture of mild interest. Vaguely. Analyst involved in some trading scandal? Senior analyst, Alexander corrected. Brilliant woman. We were engaged, actually. I didn't know that. Few did. Oh, said. We kept our relationship relatively private. Alexander's expression shifted to one of practiced regret. Devastating when we discovered what she'd been doing. Using client information for personal gain, manipulating positions. Rebecca fought the urge to scream at the blatant lies. Sounds like a breach of trust on multiple levels, Michael observed. Exactly. Alexander nodded, studying Michael carefully. The personal betrayal was difficult, but the professional implications were worse. She disappeared before the full investigation concluded essentially an admission of guilt. Or self-preservation, Michael suggested mildly. Your firm has a certain reputation for handling internal issues decisively. A flicker of something surprised concern crossed Alexander's face before his smooth mask returned. We believe in accountability, as I'm sure you do. Absolutely, when applied to the right people. The subtle emphasis wasn't lost on Alexander. His eyes narrowed slightly. The right people generally reveal themselves through their actions, don't they? The conversation had shifted from cordial to charged meanings layered beneath seemingly innocent exchanges. He's worried, Rebecca said into the microphone. Change tactics. Ask about their recent personnel changes. Michael smoothly redirected. I notice Valence has experienced significant turnover in your analytics department recently. Unusual for a firm that values loyalty. Alexander hesitated just long enough to confirm the hit had landed. Restructuring to improve efficiency. Standard business practice. Of course, though, losing 4 senior analysts in 18 months seems costly. The financial industry evolves. Some adapt, others don't. Alexander's smile turned razor thin. But we're not here to discuss HR strategies. I'm proposing a joint venture in the Iraqi tech sector. He proceeded to outline a partnership proposal that on the surface appeared advantageous to both companies. As he spoke, Rebecca analyzed his presentation, spotting the hidden traps clauses that would give Valence privileged access to Halcyon's proprietary trading algorithms, client lists, and internal procedures. It's a data mining operation, she told Michael. The partnership is just cover to access your systems. Michael listened to the proposal with polite interest, asking occasional questions that revealed nothing of his true thoughts. I'll need time to review the specifics with my team, he said when Alexander concluded. Of course, Alexander stood buttoning his suit jacket. Take all the time you need, though markets move quickly, as you know. Michael walked him to the door. One question before you go. Why approach me directly? Our firms have acquisition departments for this sort of thing. Alexander paused, studying Michael with newfound intensity. Let's just say I prefer to look a potential partner in the eye. Tells you much more than spreadsheets and projections ever could. And what do you see, a worthy adversary? Or ally, depending on your decision? Alexander extended his hand. I look forward to your response, Michael. After Alexander departed, Michael locked his office door and joined Rebecca in the monitoring room. She was already reviewing the recorded meeting, making notes on Alexander's behavior patterns. He's definitely suspicious, she said without looking up. The way he brought up my case so directly, he's testing whether you know who I am. Agreed. Michael loosened his tie, but he's not certain. If he had proof, he'd have been more direct. Don't underestimate him. Alexander excels at appearing casual while strategically cornering his prey. Rebecca finally looked up, her expression troubled. The proposal is a trap. He wants access to your systems, your data. Obviously, Michael said, sitting beside her. The question is why? What does he expect to find? Rebecca considered the question. Evidence that I'm working with you, transaction records, communications, anything that would confirm his suspicions and potentially implicate you in harboring a fugitive. Then we give him exactly what he wants. Michael said, his expression shifting to one she recognized, the strategic predator who had built a financial empire. What do you mean? We accept the proposal with modifications that limit their access, of course. Then we use the partnership to access their systems. Rebecca stared at him. That's incredibly risky. High risk, high reward. Michael's eyes held a determined gleam. We need internal documents to prove they framed you. This gives us a legitimate way in. There's nothing legitimate about corporate espionage, Michael. It's not espionage if they invite us in. His smile held a dangerous edge. Besides, we're not stealing trade secrets. We're gathering evidence of criminal activity. Rebecca stood pacing the small room. Even if we could access their systems, what exactly are we looking for? They would have purged any incriminating evidence years ago. No one purges everything. There are always traces, especially in an organization that size. Michael leaned forward. Think, Rebecca. Where would the evidence be? She closed her eyes, mentally walking through Valence Global's infrastructure. The compliance department maintains untouchable archives, regulatory requirement, and Charles kept a private server for sensitive communications. Could we access either the archives, possibly through the partnership, the private server? She shook her head. Impossible without physical access to their headquarters. Michael was quiet for a moment, thinking, what if we had physical access? Rebecca laughed incredulously. What are you suggesting? Breaking into Valence Tower. Not breaking in, walking in. Invited. Michael stood, energy radiating from him. Valence Global's annual charity gala is next month. Every major player in the industry will be there, including you, including us. If we accept this partnership proposal, we'll naturally be invited. It's the perfect cover. Rebecca felt a chill run down her spine. You want me to attend an event filled with people who know exactly who I am. People who were involved in destroying my career. Not as Rebecca Harris, as Sarah Jenkins, mysterious financial consultant who never appears in public. Until now. They'll recognize me. Will they? It's been 3 years. You've changed your appearance, your style, your mannerisms. He gestured to her shorter, darker hair, her different makeup style, the subtle but significant changes in her presentation. Besides, people see what they expect to see. No one will be looking for Rebecca Harris at Michael Grant's side. The plan was audacious, bordering on insane. Yet Rebecca couldn't deny it had potential. Alexander's unexpected approach had created an opportunity they hadn't anticipated. It's a massive gamble, she said finally. Life is a gamble. Michael's expression softened. But for what it's worth, I'm betting on you. The simple statement, delivered with such conviction, touched something deep within her. If we do this, she said slowly, we need a foolproof plan, contingencies for every scenario, and a clear exit strategy if things go wrong. Already working on it. Michael's confident smile returned. Trust me, by the time we're done, Alexander Valence won't know what hit him. Over the next weeks, their partnership deepened as they prepared for the dangerous gambit ahead. The hours they spent strategizing, analyzing data, and learning to anticipate each other's thoughts created a bond neither had expected. One evening, Victor Reynolds arrived at Michael's office unannounced, just as Michael was preparing to leave for the day. We need to talk, Reynolds said, his expression grave. Alone. Michael nodded. My office. Once the door closed behind them, Reynolds didn't waste time. I know she's staying at your penthouse. Michael's expression remained neutral. Explain. Building security logs. The same woman entering your private elevator at night, leaving early morning. Different appearance, but same height, build gait analysis matches. Your mysterious consultant, I presume. You're having my building security monitored. I'm doing my job. Reynolds remained unapologetic. Protecting you and this company, something I'm not convinced she's doing. That's not your call to make. It is when you're potentially compromising everything we've built. Reynolds leaned forward. Who is she really, Michael? What does she have on you that you're taking these risks? Michael's eyes hardened. Watch your next words very carefully, Victor. I've watched your back for 20 years, since Kandahar. I've never seen you reckless, not even in combat. But this woman has you taking chances that could destroy Halcyon. Reynolds' voice lowered. Is it personal? Are you sleeping with her? Michael moved with the sudden speed that belied his age, a reminder of his special forces training. In one fluid motion, he had Reynolds backed against the wall, forearm across his chest. That's enough. His voice was deadly quiet. Whatever is between me and Miss Jenkins is my business. Your concern for the company is noted, but you're crossing a line. Reynolds didn't flinch. The Michael Grant I know would never let personal feelings cloud his judgment. And the Victor Reynolds I know would trust me enough to know I have reasons for what I'm doing. The two men stared at each other, decades of friendship and mutual respect, temporarily overshadowed by the current tension. Finally, Reynolds nodded. You've earned that trust. But this doesn't feel right, Michael. The Valance is reaching out suddenly. Their interest in your consultant. The charity gala invitation that arrived today. It feels like a trap. Michael released him, stepping back. Perhaps it is, but not the kind you're thinking of. Then bring me in. Let me help. Michael considered his old friend for a long moment. Not yet, but soon. Reynolds straightened his jacket. Whatever you're planning, be careful. Charles Valance didn't get where he is by playing fair. Neither did I. Michael opened the door. Go home, Victor. Get some rest. After Reynolds left, Michael returned to the penthouse, finding Rebecca in what had become their war room, surrounded by files and digital displays. She looked up as he entered, immediately sensing his tension. What's wrong? Reynolds knows you're staying here. He's suspicious about our sudden connection to the Valance. Rebecca's face paled. Will he be a problem? No, Victor and I go back a long way. He doesn't trust you, but he trusts me. Should he? Rebecca asked quietly. Trust you, I mean. You are risking everything for someone you barely know. Michael studied her for a long moment. I know enough. He moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. Victor and I served together. Navy SEALs. He saved my life in Afghanistan. Pulled me out of a firefight when anyone else would have left me for dead. Rebecca joined him at the window. You never mentioned you were in combat. 2 tours before I built all this. He gestured to the skyline. That world and this one rarely intersect. Is that why you're helping me? Some sort of military code about protecting the innocent? Michael turned to her, his expression softening. I'm helping you because it's the right thing to do. And because in the short time I've known you, I've come to... He paused, seeming to search for the right words. To what? Rebecca prompted, her heart suddenly racing. To care about what happens to you. His voice was low, intimate. More than I expected to. The admission hung in the air between them, changing the atmosphere in the room. Rebecca was acutely aware of their proximity, of the way Michael's eyes held hers, of the subtle shift that had been building for weeks. Michael, His phone rang, shattering the moment. Michael checked the screen and frowned. It's my daughter, Emily. I need to take this. Rebecca nodded, stepping back, relieved and disappointed in equal measure. Of course. As Michael answered the call, moving to another room for privacy, Rebecca returned to her work, trying to refocus. But the almost moment lingered in her mind, a reminder of the complex emotions developing beneath their professional partnership. The next morning, a courier delivered an elegant envelope to Michael's penthouse. Inside was a formal invitation to the Valance Global Annual Charity Gala to be held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Temple of Dendur. The handwritten note from Alexander Valance read, Looking forward to introducing you to my father. Feel free to bring your insightful consultant. We'd love to meet the person who's helped Halcyon make such impressive moves in our territory. Rebecca read the note over Michael's shoulder, a chill running down her spine. This confirms it. They suspect who I am. Or they're fishing, Michael countered. Either way, the trap is set. The question is who's catching whom. They spent the day preparing, reviewing the museum's floor plans, security systems, and the location of Charles Valence's private office at Valance Tower, where he would host a select group of VIPs before the main event. The private server would be in his office, Rebecca explained, pointing to the building schematics Michael had somehow acquired. Charles is old school. He keeps sensitive information close. So our plan is to accept the pre-gala reception invitation, then one of us slips away to access the server while the other maintains visibility. Rebecca nodded. We'd need precise timing, security credentials, and a distraction. Leave those to me. Michael pulled out his phone and made a call. Marcus, I need specialized equipment, the kind we used in Dubai last year. Yes, black tie event. Tomorrow's fine. After ending the call, he turned to Rebecca. Former Special Forces, now he provides unique security solutions. You seem to have a lot of connections from your military days. The kind of bonds formed under fire don't break easily. Michael studied the building plans again. Speaking of connections, there's something we need to discuss regarding the gala. What's that? Our cover. Why you'll be there with me. He looked up, meeting her eyes. The most natural explanation, the one that would raise fewest questions, would be that we're involved. Rebecca felt heat rise to her cheeks. Involved. It would explain your presence at my side, our private conversations, why I value your input. Michael's tone was practical, but his eyes held something more. Unless you are uncomfortable with the pretense. Was it only pretense? The question hung unspoken between them. It makes tactical sense, Rebecca conceded, trying to maintain professional distance despite the flutter in her chest. No one questions why a man brings a date to a gala. Then it's settled. For one night, we're more than business associates. Michael's gaze lingered on hers a moment longer than necessary. We should prepare your disguise. Alexander knew you with longer hair, different style. I've been changing my appearance for 3 years, Rebecca reminded him. I know how to avoid recognition. Still, we should leave nothing to chance. I've arranged for a stylist to come tomorrow. Someone discreet. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. You think a haircut and new dress will fool the man I was engaged to? No. Michael's expression turned serious. But combined with the last place they'd expect to find you, the last person they'd expect you to be with, and 3 years of believing you've fled the country, it might be just enough to get us what we need. Later that night, unable to sleep, Rebecca found herself drawn to the penthouse terrace. The night air was cool against her skin as she gazed out at the city lights, trying to quiet her racing thoughts. The sound of the door opening behind her announced Michael's presence before he spoke. Can't sleep. She turned to find him in casual clothes jeans and a simple black t-shirt, so different from his usual corporate armor. The change made him seem more approachable, more human. Too much on my mind, she admitted. He joined her at the railing. Second thoughts. About a dozen of them. She attempted a smile. What if they recognize me? What if we can't access the server? What if we find nothing? What if we succeed, Michael countered. What if we find the evidence you need to clear your name? What if this time next year you're living your life openly, again working wherever you choose using your real name? The possibility seemed so remote, yet Michael's confidence made it feel almost within reach. I've spent 3 years convinced that would never happen, she said softly. It's hard to let myself hope. Hope is the most powerful weapon against despair. Michael's voice carried the weight of someone who had known both. Without it, we surrender before the battle begins. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the city spread before them. Tell me about your daughter, Rebecca said finally. You mentioned her call earlier. Michael's expression softened. Emily, 28, doctor with Médecins Sans Frontières, currently in Sudan. Like her father serving others. Better than her father, she saves lives directly. I just move money around. Is that all you think you do? Michael considered the question. At its best, finance can change lives, create opportunities. At its worst, he glanced at her. Well, you've seen the worst. Yes, Rebecca looked back at the city. That's why what we're doing matters. It's not just about clearing my name. It's about exposing the corruption that hurts real people. Is that why you became a financial analyst, to fight corruption? Rebecca laughed softly. Hardly. I wanted to be successful, make money, prove myself. Her expression turned reflective. It was only after everything fell apart that I realized what really mattered. And what's that? The truth, Justice. She turned to face him fully, not living in fear. Michael's eyes held hers, the connection between them deepening. Tomorrow we take a step toward all three. As they stood together under the stars, the city lights reflecting in their eyes, both recognized that whatever happened at the gala would change everything, not just Rebecca's future, but the complex bond forming between them. Across town in his penthouse office at Valence Tower, Charles Valence reviewed the guest list for tomorrow's gala, his attention fixing on one name in particular. Michael Grant, he mused aloud. +1. Alexander, seated across from him, nodded. He confirmed this afternoon. Wouldn't specify who he's bringing. Charles studied his son carefully. You're certain it's her? Not certain, but the timing, the specific market insights Halcyon has suddenly developed. It fits. Rebecca Harris was a fool to cross us once. If she's returned, Charles let the implication hang in the air. We'll know tomorrow, Alexander replied, his expression unreadable. Charles tapped his fingers on the desk. Ensure the security team has her photo. Discreetly. If she's there, I want to know immediately. And if it is her, Charles smiled coldly, then we'll make sure she regrets coming out of hiding. What neither Valance noticed was the momentary flicker of hesitation in Alexander's eyes, a fleeting glimpse of an inner conflict that had been growing since the day Rebecca disappeared. The Temple of Dender glowed with warm, amber light, transforming the ancient Egyptian monument, housed within the Metropolitan Museum's soaring glass atrium, into a surreal backdrop for New York's financial elite. Champagne flowed as freely as insider information, the air thick with the particular mix of perfume, ambition, and power that defined such gatherings. Michael Grant stood at the edge of the crowd, his custom tuxedo marking him as one of their own, while his military posture set him subtly apart. He surveyed the room with practiced ease, nodding to familiar faces, engaging in brief pleasantries when necessary, all while maintaining an awareness of every entrance and exit habits from his former life as a Navy SEAL that had served him well in his current one. Nervous, he murmured to the woman beside him. Rebecca turned toward him, almost unrecognizable from the waitress who had served him ribeye 3 months earlier. The stylist Michael had arranged had transformed her completely, her dark hair now platinum blonde in an elegant updo, emerald contact lenses replacing her natural blue, her black gown both sophisticated and distinctive enough to draw attention away from her face. She looked nothing like Rebecca Harris, nothing like Sarah Jenkins, yet somehow more confident than either. Terrified, she admitted quietly, her gloved hand resting lightly on his arm in a gesture that appeared intimate to observers but also kept her trembling fingers steady. I've spotted 6 people who knew me well. None have given me a second glance. People see what they expect to see, Michael replied smoothly, accepting 2 champagne flutes from a passing waiter. And no one expects Rebecca Harris to walk willingly into the lion's den. She took the glass but didn't drink, using it as a prop while scanning the room. Charles Valance just arrived. East entrance. Michael didn't turn immediately, instead waiting for a natural moment to shift his position. Charles Valance, at 72, remained an imposing figure, tall and lean, with a full head of silver hair and the sharp features that his son had inherited. His tuxedo probably cost as much as a mid-level employee's annual salary, his Patek Philippe watch worth considerably more. And Alexander with him. Rebecca added, her voice steady despite the slight increase in pressure from her fingers on Michael's arm. Along with that woman in red, that's Elise Montgomery, their chief counsel. Rebecca's attention lingered on Alexander. Something in his demeanor seemed off, a certain tension in his shoulders, a momentary hesitation, when his father placed a hand on his back, guiding him toward a group of investors. It was subtle, but to someone who had once known him intimately, the discord was visible. You remember your objective? Michael asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Maintain visibility, stay by your side, nothing to trigger recognition. She forced a smile that would appear genuine to distant observers. Meanwhile, Reynolds will monitor from the security office and create the distraction precisely at 9:45. Through her earpiece, Reynolds' voice came through with military precision. Surveillance team in position. Linda Chen arrived 5 minutes ago with the Chicago delegation. She's been briefed and will remain on standby if needed. Rebecca's eyes widened slightly at the mention of her former assistant. Michael hadn't told her that he'd made contact with Linda. She shot him a questioning glance, but he gave a subtle shake of his head. Not now. I'll secure the access credentials from Charles's private coat check ticket, Michael continued smoothly. His jacket always contains his security pass. How can you be certain of that? The corner of Michael's mouth lifted. Because I had my people observe him for 2 weeks. The man is a creature of absolute habit, down to hanging his jacket in precisely the same spot at every function. Before Rebecca could respond, they were approached by a distinguished couple in their 60s, Henry Blackwell, chairman of Eastern Regional Bank, and his wife Margaret. Michael Grant, Blackwell boomed, extending his hand. Didn't expect to see you here. You usually avoid these circus events. Henry, Margaret, Michael greeted them warmly. Special circumstances tonight. He placed his hand gently at the small of Rebecca's back. May I introduce Sophia Reeves, my consultant? The hesitation was deliberate, suggesting an intimacy beyond professional boundaries without stating it explicitly. Rebecca extended her hand, her posture and demeanor exuding a quiet confidence that would have been impossible for her just months ago. A pleasure to meet you both. Mr. Grant speaks highly of your work with sustainable banking initiatives. Margaret Blackwell raised an eyebrow, giving Rebecca an appraising look. Consultant, how mysterious. And what exactly do you consult on, my dear? Investment opportunities others miss, Rebecca replied with a cryptic smile. The overlooked potential in unexpected places. She's being modest, Michael interjected. Ms. Reeves has an exceptional talent for spotting both opportunities and deceptions in the market. She's made Halcyon quite profitable these past months. Henry Blackwell chuckled. I imagine she has. Well, any woman who can impress Michael Grant is someone worth knowing. He glanced across the room. Speaking of impressions, I see Charles Valance is looking this way. Surprised you two are in the same room without security between you. Business sometimes requires setting aside personal differences, Michael replied diplomatically. Business, Margaret echoed with surprise. Last I heard you called Charles Valance a cancer on the financial industry at the Economic Forum. Did I? Michael's expression revealed nothing. Perhaps I've reconsidered. Or perhaps there's more to the story, Blackwell said shrewdly. Well, don't let us keep you. I suspect the Valances will be making their way over soon enough. As the Blackwells moved on, Rebecca leaned slightly closer to Michael. Cancer on the financial industry. One of my more restrained descriptions, he admitted. I've never hidden my distaste for their methods. Then why would they believe you'd suddenly partner with them? Greed is a powerful motivator. They'll believe I'd set aside principles for profit because that's what they would do. His eyes scanned the room. Alexander's watching us. Time to move toward the East Gallery. We need to be noticed, but not yet approached. For the next 45 minutes, they executed a carefully choreographed dance through the gala, visible enough to be noted, engaged enough to appear legitimately participating in the event, yet always moving with purpose that discouraged lengthy conversation. At precisely 9:30, Michael checked his watch. 15 minutes until Reynolds creates the distraction. We should position ourselves near Charles now. Michael, Reynolds' voice came through their earpieces. Security team reports unusual activity on Valance's private network. They might be running counter-surveillance. Michael's expression didn't change, but Rebecca felt his hand tense slightly at her back. Understood. Proceed as planned, but heightened awareness. They made their way toward the small gathering surrounding Charles Valance. As they approached, Charles looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly as he noticed Michael. With deliberate casualness, he excused himself from his current conversation and moved to intercept them. Michael Grant, the rumors are true then. Charles's voice carried the particular timbre of old money and older power. The hermit of Halcyon Capital has emerged from his tower. Charles, Michael's greeting was cordial but cool. Impressive event. The Children's Hospital must be grateful for your generosity. Tax-deductible philanthropy, Charles replied with a thin smile. The cornerstone of reputation management. His gaze shifted to Rebecca, studying her with the calculating assessment of a man accustomed to assigning value to everything and everyone he encountered. And who might this be? Sophia Reeves, Michael said, my strategic consultant. Ah, the mysterious analyst Alexander mentioned. Charles extended his hand. A pleasure, Ms. Reeves. I understand you've been instrumental in Halcyon's recent successes in markets where we typically dominate. Rebecca took his hand, briefly fighting the visceral revulsion at touching the man who had orchestrated her downfall. I merely identify opportunities, Mr. Valance. Mr. Grant makes them realities. Charles's gaze lingered on her face a moment too long. You seem familiar, Ms. Reeves. Have we met before? Rebecca's heart hammered in her chest, but her expression remained placid. I don't believe so. I would remember meeting someone of your stature. Perhaps at a conference. I speak at many financial forums. The echo of her own words to Michael months ago was not lost on Rebecca. I avoid public events generally. Tonight is an exception. For Michael, obviously. Charles's smile didn't reach his eyes. How interesting that a woman of your particular talents would align herself with the one man in finance who's been openly hostile to my organization. As Charles spoke, Rebecca noticed Alexander watching their exchange from a few yards away. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, a tension, perhaps concern, that seemed at odds with his father's predatory confidence. Talent goes where it's valued, Charles, Michael interjected smoothly. Speaking of which, Alexander mentioned a potential collaboration. I've reviewed the proposal. There are aspects worth discussing further. Charles's expression shifted to one of calculated interest. Indeed, that is surprising. Perhaps we should continue this conversation in a more private setting. I'm hosting a select group in my office at Valence Tower after the main event. More intimate, more productive. We'd be delighted, Michael replied, the subtle emphasis on we, making it clear Rebecca would accompany him. Charles glanced at his watch. I need to make some remarks soon. Excuse me while I prepare. Alexander will provide you the details for later. He turned to Rebecca one last time. I look forward to learning more about you, Ms. Reeves. Your background must be fascinating. As Charles walked away, Rebecca maintained her composure with effort. He suspects, she whispered. He's curious, Michael corrected. There's a difference. He checked his watch again. 9:42, 3 minutes until Reynolds initiates the distraction. I need to get to the coat check area now. I'll maintain visibility near the central display. Rebecca confirmed smoothly, separating from him as they'd practiced. Rebecca positioned herself near the ancient temple, appearing to study the hieroglyphics, while maintaining peripheral awareness of her surroundings. Through the earpiece concealed by her hairstyle, she heard Reynolds' calm voice. Surveillance confirms Charles left his jacket with private coat check. Standard location, security pass in inner left pocket. Linda Chen is in position to intercept if there's trouble. Distraction commencing in 60 seconds. Rebecca watched as Michael casually made his way toward the private coat check area reserved for VIPs. As he disappeared around a corner, she tensed, waiting for the planned diversion. Right on schedule, a commotion erupted near the main entrance. A security guard rushed forward, followed by shouts and the sound of breaking glass. Reynolds had orchestrated the perfect distraction. Nothing dangerous but chaotic enough to draw attention and security personnel away from the private areas. Through her earpiece, Rebecca heard Michael's voice. Access secured, proceeding to secondary objective. The secondary objective was Charles Valence's private office on the executive floor of Valence Tower, not part of the post-gala reception, but accessible with the security pass Michael had just acquired. According to their intelligence, the office contained a private server with sensitive communications not connected to the main Valence global network. Rebecca forced herself to remain in place, playing her role as the visible half of their operation when every instinct screamed to follow Michael. Instead, she moved slowly around the temple display, appearing to admire the ancient architecture while positioning herself to monitor the room. Ms. Reeves, the voice behind her sent ice through her veins. Admiring our shared history. Rebecca turned to find Alexander Valence standing too close, his familiar cologne bringing unwanted memories flooding back. Up close, she could see the subtle signs of aging that 3 years had etched on his face, fine lines around his eyes, a slight hardening of his jawline. Still handsome, still projecting that particular confidence that had once captivated her. The temple, she replied, gesturing to the structure. It's beautiful, though I believe it was moved stone by stone from its original location. Yes, displaced from its home, reconstructed elsewhere. Alexander studied her face with unnerving intensity. Sometimes things are not where or what they appear to be. Rebecca maintained her calm exterior through sheer force of will. Philosophy at a charity gala, Mr. Valence, how unexpected. Alexander, please. He moved slightly closer. I find that unexpected connections often prove the most illuminating. His eyes never left her face. Like your sudden appearance in Michael Grant's life. Quite the coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences, Rebecca countered. Only opportunities recognized or missed. A perspective I share. Alexander's smile held a predatory edge, but something in his eyes contradicted it, a flicker of what might have been regret, quickly masked. For instance, I recognized an opportunity the moment I saw you tonight. And what opportunity is that? The chance to understand what Michael Grant really wants. He gestured toward where Charles was now addressing the crowd. My father believes Grant is finally setting aside principles for profit. I disagree. A man like Grant doesn't change his fundamental nature. Perhaps you don't know him as well as you think. Perhaps, Alexander's voice dropped lower, but I do know when someone is hiding something. You seem to be hiding quite a lot, Ms. Reeves. Through her earpiece, Rebecca heard Reynolds' urgent voice. Security alert at Valance Tower. Grant has triggered a silent alarm. Extraction team on standby. Linda Chen is moving to secure the escape route. Rebecca felt a cold dread spreading through her chest, but kept her expression neutral. We all have our secrets, Mr. Valance. The question is which ones matter. Alexander leaned closer, his lips nearly touching her ear. I know exactly who you are, Rebecca. Her heart stopped. The blood drained from her face as she pulled back to look at him, seeing the absolute certainty in his eyes. There was no point in denial. How long have you known? Since you walked in. His voice remained low for her ears only. I would know you anywhere in any disguise. Alexander glanced quickly around them, then continued with unexpected urgency. Listen carefully. My father has been watching Grant for weeks. He knows more than you think. There are other players involved, people even I can't control. And the intensity in his voice was different than she remembered, not the practiced charm of the executive, but something more raw, more genuine. What are you saying? That you're in deeper danger than you realize. My father, Reeves. Michael's voice cut through the tension as he appeared at her side, looking impeccable and unruffled, despite what must have been a narrow escape. I apologize for disappearing. A call from our Tokyo office required immediate attention. Alexander released her arm, his expression shifting back to polished charm with remarkable speed. Perfect timing, Grant. I was just inviting Ms. Reeves to join the private gathering at Valance Tower. I'm afraid we'll have to decline, Michael replied smoothly. A situation has developed that requires our immediate attention. How unfortunate. Alexander's eyes moved between them, then settled on Rebecca with an intensity that seemed to be trying to convey something unspoken. Another time, perhaps. Perhaps? Michael placed his hand protectively at Rebecca's back. Good evening, Alexander. As they walked away, Rebecca fought to keep her steps measured and unhurried. Once they reached a relatively private alcove, she whispered urgently, He knows who I am. Alexander recognized me immediately. I suspected he might. Michael's calm was unshakable. But it doesn't matter now. I got what we came for. You accessed the server even after triggering the alarm. The alarm was a necessary distraction. Reynolds had a secondary team create a security incident on another floor. A hint of the former Navy SEAL showed through his corporate exterior. Always have multiple contingencies, Rebecca. We need to leave, now. Alexander said something strange about his father watching you about other players involved. Michael's eyes narrowed. Manipulation tactics. He's trying to create doubt, divide us. Maybe, but there was something different about him. Almost like he was warning me. We can analyze his performance later. Right now, we need to extract safely and secure what we've found. They made their way toward the exit, pausing to say appropriate goodbyes to select guests, maintaining the illusion of a normal departure. In the limousine waiting outside, Reynolds was already seated, his laptop open. Preliminary sweep indicates the data is intact, but there may be tracking software embedded. He reported without preamble. We're isolating it now. How did Linda Chen perform? Michael asked as the car pulled away from the curb. Flawlessly, Reynolds replied. She provided the precise location of Charles's private files and disabled the secondary alarm system. She's being extracted separately with her own security detail. Rebecca looked between them, suddenly understanding. You contacted Linda weeks ago, didn't you? Michael nodded. After our discussion, she was essential to mapping Valance's internal security. And you didn't tell me. You said it was too dangerous. I respected that concern, but made the operational decision to proceed with appropriate safeguards. His tone was unapologetic but not unkind. She wanted to help you, Rebecca. She never believed the accusations. Rebecca absorbed this, emotions conflicted. Is she safe if Charles suspects? She submitted her resignation 3 days ago, effective immediately after the gala. Reynolds interjected. By morning, she'll be on a private flight to our Singapore office with a new position and identity package. The thoroughness of their planning both impressed and unsettled Rebecca. What exactly did you find on the server? Michael pulled a small encrypted drive from his inner pocket. Everything. Emails, transaction records, and most importantly, recorded conversations between Charles and several executives, including detailed discussions about how they framed you. They actually recorded it. Charles records everything, Insurance against betrayal even from family, especially from family. Michael's gaze was intent. But there's more. The files also contain evidence of widespread corruption extending beyond Valencia. Global bribes to regulatory officials, collusion with other firms, manipulation of markets on a scale that threatens the entire financial system. This is bigger than just my case, Rebecca said, the implications dawning on her. Much bigger, Reynolds agreed grimly. This could implicate half of Wall Street. Back at Michael's secure penthouse, a team of forensic data analysts was already at work extracting and cataloging the evidence. Rebecca watched through the glass wall of Michael's home office as they methodically built the case that would clear her name. Michael joined her, handing her a glass of scotch. "To justice," he said simply. She took the glass but didn't drink. "It can't be this easy." "Easy," Michael raised an eyebrow. 3 months of investigation, a high-risk infiltration, and years of your life lost. I wouldn't call it easy. You know what I mean. The Valences have survived countless investigations. They're too powerful, too connected. No one is untouchable, not even Charles Valence. As the night progressed, they delved deeper into the files, building a comprehensive picture of the Valences' criminal enterprise. The evidence was overwhelming, not just of Rebecca's framing, but of years of securities fraud, market manipulation, and corruption that reached into regulatory agencies themselves. Michael pulled up a specific email chain. "Look at this. Charles explicitly ordered the fabrication of evidence against you." Rebecca leaned closer, seeing her professional execution outlined in cold, calculated terms. And then another document caught her eye, a series of exchanges between Charles and Alexander from 3 years ago. "Wait," she said, pointing to the screen. "Look at this." The email showed Alexander initially objecting to framing her, suggesting alternative approaches. Charles's responses were coldly threatening, referencing vague consequences if Alexander didn't comply. The final message in the chain was Alexander's reluctant agreement, followed by a cryptic line, "Like mother, like son, we all make our compromises." "What does that mean?" Michael asked. "I don't know," Rebecca admitted. "Alexander's mother died when he was a teenager. Car accident, supposedly." Reynolds, who had been working quietly in the corner, looked up. "Our background investigation found inconsistencies in the accident report. Never enough to reopen the case, but suspicious. Charles's own wife." Michael's expression darkened. "Even for him, that's extreme," Reynolds finished. "Maybe, but there's a pattern of convenient accidents around people who threaten Charles's control." A cold realization settled over Rebecca. If Alexander suspected his father was involved in his mother's death, it would explain why he might have his own agenda, Michael concluded. "But it doesn't change what he did to you." "No, it doesn't," Rebecca agreed. "But it might explain why he seemed to be warning me tonight." Their discussion was interrupted by Reynolds' secure phone ringing. His expression turned grave as he listened to the caller. "Understood. Secure the perimeter. Full protocol." He ended the call, looking at Michael. "Charles Valence just suffered a massive heart attack at the post-gala reception. He's being rushed to New York Presbyterian." Rebecca stared at him, processing the implications. "The evidence remains our priority," Michael said firmly, "but this complicates the timing. Reynolds, get me James Sullivan's widow on the phone. It's time to bring her into the loop." As Reynolds stepped out to make the call, Rebecca turned to Michael. "James's widow, why now?" "Because if we're going to do this right, we need more than just legal justice. We need to honor the people whose lives were destroyed." Michael's expression softened. "Sarah Sullivan has spent 5 years believing her husband took his own life. She deserves to know the truth before it hits the news." Rebecca nodded, understanding dawning. "And you're thinking beyond just clearing my name, aren't you?" "I'm thinking about legacy," Michael admitted, "about what justice really means in cases like this. Financial penalties and prison sentences are necessary but not sufficient. The system itself needs to change." The news of Charles Valence's heart attack dominated financial headlines the next morning. By afternoon, Valence Global had announced that Alexander would assume full control as acting CEO. The following day, as Charles remained in critical condition, Rebecca received a call from a number she didn't recognize. "Rebecca Harris," she answered, using her real name for the first time in years. "It's Alexander. We need to talk." Rebecca's breath caught. "How did you get this number?" "The same way I've kept track of you for 3 years," he replied, his voice lacking its usual polish. Rebecca, I know what Grant took from my father's server. I know you're planning to release everything. How could you possibly know that? Because I've been monitoring my father's security systems waiting for this opportunity. His voice held none of the polished charm from the gala. I want to meet, just you, to explain certain things before you go public. You must think I'm insane. I think you deserve the full truth before you decide how to proceed. There are things about your framing about my mother that only I can tell you. Against Michael's strong objections, Rebecca agreed to meet Alexander in Central Park the following morning, but with conditions Reynolds would monitor from a distance and she would wear a recording device. Alexander was waiting on a bench overlooking the reservoir, looking nothing like the confident executive from the gala. His posture was deflated, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion and what appeared to be grief. "Thank you for coming," he said as she sat beside him, maintaining careful distance. "I'm not staying long. Say what you need to say." Alexander took a deep breath. "My father died an hour ago. The official cause will be listed as heart failure." The news hit her unexpectedly. Charles Valens had been a monster, but his sudden absence from the world felt momentous nonetheless. "I'm sorry," she said automatically. "Don't be. The world's better without him." The bitterness in Alexander's voice was palpable. "What you don't know, what almost no one knows, is that I've been building a case against him for years." Rebecca studied him skeptically. "You expect me to believe that after what you did to me?" "I don't expect forgiveness, Rebecca. What I did was unforgivable." He met her gaze directly. "But I need you to understand why. 3 weeks after you disappeared, I discovered files proving my father had arranged my mother's accident when she threatened to expose his initial fraudulent schemes. I realized then what kind of man I was protecting." He pulled a small drive from his coat pocket. "This contains everything I've gathered over the past 3 years, recordings, documents, witness statements from people who were too afraid to come forward while he was alive. It's more comprehensive than what Grant took from the server. Why would you collect evidence against your own father? Initially for leveraged self-preservation. Later to bring him down without destroying the company and the thousands of innocent employees who depend on it." Alexander's voice lowered. "And to make amends in some small way for what I did to you and others." Rebecca didn't take the drive. "Why not come forward sooner? My father had fail-safes, people loyal to him, who would destroy anyone who moved against him, including his son. I needed his power diminished, his allies identified." Alexander's face showed genuine regret. "I've spent 3 years dismantling his protection network one piece at a time. And now I'm offering a partnership. Take this evidence, combine it with what you have, and we can transform Valence Global into something ethical, something that makes restitution to those harmed." He held the drive out again. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Rebecca. Just the chance to make something right out of all this wrong." After a long moment, Rebecca took the drive. "I'll review this with Michael. If what you're saying is true, it is." Alexander stood to leave, then hesitated. "For what it's worth, not a day has passed that I haven't regretted what I did to you. I don't expect that to matter to you, but I needed to say it." As she watched him walk away, Rebecca felt a complex mixture of emotions: anger, confusion, the faintest hint of something like closure. When she returned to the penthouse, Michael and Reynolds were waiting with Sarah Sullivan, a dignified woman in her early 50s, whose grief had clearly shaped her but not broken her. "What did he want?" Michael demanded the moment Rebecca entered. She held up Alexander's drive. "To give us this, and more evidence of Charles's crimes, including confirmation that he had Alexander's mother killed." Sarah Sullivan's eyes widened. Just like James, he suspected Charles was involved in financial crimes that led to deaths in developing countries. Called them balance sheet murders. "Mrs. Sullivan has agreed to help us create a foundation," Michael explained. "Using the settlement money we'll extract from Valence Global to fund oversight of financial crimes and support for whistleblowers." "The Sullivan Accountability Project," Sarah elaborated. "To ensure what happened to James to you to others doesn't keep happening." Over the next 3 weeks, their team worked meticulously with Alexander's evidence, building an airtight case that they presented simultaneously to the SEC, FBI, and selected journalists. The impact was seismic: immediate investigations, suspensions of trading, and a complete restructuring of Valence Global. The legal process moved with unusual speed, driven by the overwhelming evidence and Alexander's full cooperation. Rebecca testified before congressional committees, SEC panels, and grand juries, her name fully cleared as the narrative shifted from fraud to heroic whistleblower. 6 months later, Rebecca Harris officially returned to the financial world, not as an analyst, but as the executive director of the newly established Sullivan Accountability Foundation. The organization's headquarters, funded by a $500 million settlement from Valence Global and matching contributions from Halcyon Capital, occupied a full floor in a midtown building with views of Central Park. At the press conference announcing the foundation's formal launch, Rebecca stood at the podium flanked by Michael Sarah Sullivan, and most surprisingly to the financial press, Alexander Valence, now overseeing Valence Global's transformation under strict regulatory oversight. Financial crimes aren't victimless, Rebecca told the assembled reporters. Real people lose savings jobs and sometimes even lives because of corporate fraud. This foundation will help ensure that those responsible face consequences and those who speak truth receive protection. A reporter raised his hand. Ms. Harris, what would you say to other whistleblowers who fear the consequences of coming forward? Rebecca considered the question. That the hardest path is often the right one. That truth has a power beyond what we imagine, and that you're not alone. Michael watched from the side of the stage, his usual impassive expression softened by something that looked remarkably like pride. When she finished speaking, he joined her at the podium. Mr. Grant, called another reporter, how does this initiative align with Halcyon Capital's traditional investment strategies? It represents an evolution, Michael replied, one that recognizes that true prosperity must be built on integrity. Ms. Harris, yet another journalist asked, sources suggest your relationship with Mr. Grant extends beyond professional. Care to comment? Rebecca exchanged a glance with Michael, a silent communication passing between them. Some partnerships, she said carefully, prove valuable in more ways than initially anticipated. Later that evening, in the privacy of what had become their shared penthouse, Michael and Rebecca stood on the terrace overlooking the city lights. Reynolds had just left after delivering the news that Linda Chen had been promoted to head of compliance at Halcyon's Singapore office, her new identity secure and her role in their operation known only to a trusted few. To new beginnings, Michael said, raising his glass to Rebecca. She smiled, clinking her glass against his. Not just new, but better, stronger in the broken places. I believe Hemingway said something similar. He did, and he was right. She set down her glass, moving closer to him. Thank you, Michael. Not just for clearing my name, but for showing me that running isn't the only response to threat. That standing your ground can lead to something better than what was lost. You showed me something too, he replied, his voice softening. That purpose matters more than profit. That justice is worth fighting for even at great cost. Michael gently tucked a strand of hair, now returned to its natural color behind her ear. The past 3 years shaped you, Rebecca, but they don't define you. Nor do they define us, she said, the question in her eyes speaking volumes. His answer came not in words, but in the kiss that followed, a promise more binding than any contract the future built, not on the ashes of the past, but on the truth they had uncovered together. On the desk behind them lay the morning's Wall Street Journal, its headline reading, Financial Watchdog Foundation Launches with Industry Support. The subheading, Rebecca Harris and Michael Grant lead effort to reform Wall Street culture. The journey from destruction to redemption had been longer and more painful than she could have imagined that night at the Metropolitan, when a billionaire had mockingly asked for her financial advice. But as Michael drew her closer, Rebecca knew with absolute certainty that some falls were simply the beginning of a greater rise. What's next? She whispered against his shoulder. Michael smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. Whatever we decide together. Reynolds had once asked Michael if his feelings for Rebecca were clouding his judgment. Looking at her now, Michael realized the truth was exactly the opposite. She had cleared his vision, helped him see beyond the next deal, the next acquisition, to something that might actually matter when all the money and power faded away. Legacy, justice, love. Not a bad foundation on which to build a future.